welcome to our channel. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, telling us where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your thoughts and keep the conversation going. The chandeliers sparkled like frozen constellations above the ballroom, catching every glint of diamond, champagne glass, and whispered secret. The Walsh Foundation's annual charity gala was a showcase of power and prestige, a night where old money mingled with new, and every camera sought the perfect shot. Allen Walsh moved through the crowd as if it were his second home. At 32, he had perfected the look of effortless success. The tailored black tuxedo, the confident stride, the polite but practiced smile. A billionaire tech mogul with his name on headlines and philanthropic campaigns alike, Allen wasn't there just for charity. He was there to be seen, to remind everyone that his empire had only grown larger, stronger. He accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, scanning the room with a quiet detachment. Politicians, CEOs, celebrities, he knew them all, shook their hands and delivered the rehearsed lines of charm. It was routine. Until he saw her. Across the ballroom, framed by a cluster of donors and a towering arrangement of orchids, Olivia Marsh laughed at something someone said. The sound carried, warm and rich, and for a second Allen forgot the clamor of the gala. Her hair, a cascade of deep auburn waves, caught the golden light. She wore a dark green gown that hugged her figure with understated elegance, not screaming for attention but commanding it nonetheless. He remembered that look, effortless confidence, the kind that used to drive him insane back in high school. Olivia Marsh. His rival, his shadow, his constant challenger. Allen felt the corners of his mouth tighten. He hadn't seen her in over a decade, not since they'd graduated and gone separate ways. Last he'd heard, she'd built her own financial consulting firm, one with a reputation for fixing impossible problems. The newspapers occasionally praised her as the sharpest strategist in the room. Seeing her here now at his gala felt almost like fate playing a cruel joke. She spotted him. Their eyes locked across the room and Olivia's smile faltered into a smirk, sharp, knowing, the same one she used to flash before beating him in debate tournaments. Allen inhaled slowly, steeling himself. If she thought she could waltz into his event without stirring old battles, she was sorely mistaken. He crossed the room with steady steps, weaving through groups until he stood directly before her circle. The donors quickly excused themselves, perhaps sensing the sudden chill in the air. Olivia Marsh, Allen said smoothly, raising his glass. What an unexpected surprise. Her smirk widened. Allen Walsh. Of course this is your event. Only you would plaster your last name across every banner and program booklet. I almost thought I'd walked into a coronation. Allen tilted his head, letting her jab roll off him. Well, when you donate as much as I do, people tend to remember the name. Olivia arched a brow. Or when you make sure they don't forget it. The air between them crackled, half hostility, half something unspoken. Around them, a few curious onlookers pretended not to eavesdrop. Allen leaned slightly closer, lowering his voice. Tell me, Olivia, what brings you here? Couldn't resist the chance to bask in someone else's spotlight. She gave a small laugh, cool and deliberate. I'm here because the Children's Literacy Initiative asked me to be. They said the Walsh Foundation was providing the venue, but I didn't realize I'd also be walking into your ego parade. Allen's jaw tightened, though his smile stayed fixed. Still sharp-tongued as ever. And you're still intolerable, she replied without missing a beat. For a moment, silence stretched. Then strangely, Allen felt a flicker of amusement. The old rivalry surged, but it wasn't the bitter resentment of their teenage years. It was sharper, laced with a spark he couldn't quite name. Olivia turned slightly, her gown shimmering as she reached for a flute of champagne from a passing tray. She raised it in a mock toast. To the gala. May the charity make more money than your PR team spent putting your face in every brochure. Allen chuckled under his breath, surprising even himself. Careful, Olivia. Keep talking like that and people will think you've missed me. Her eyes glinted. Missed you? Allen, the only thing I missed was the peace and quiet after graduation. Yet the way she said it, light but charged, left something lingering in the air. As the orchestra swelled and couples drifted to the dance floor, Allen realized this night would not be the smooth exercise in control he had planned. Not with Olivia Marsh in the room. Not with the fire in her eyes that threatened to dismantle every wall he'd built around himself. And for the first time in years, Allen Walsh wasn't entirely sure if he was ready for the game they were about to play. Allen had not expected the night to turn into a sparring match, yet here he was, watching Olivia glide across the room as though she owned it. He could pretend it didn't bother him, but the truth was clear. Her presence unsettled him in a way business competitors, journalists, and board members never could. He told himself it was because of their history. After all, Olivia Marsh wasn't just an old acquaintance. She was the rival of his youth, the one who always managed to trip his stride just when he thought he had won. High school debate championships, science fairs, student council elections. Allen Walsh and Olivia Marsh had stood on opposite ends of nearly everything, two bright stars caught in an endless contest for who could shine brighter. And more often than not, she had beaten him. So why did it feel exhilarating to have her here again? Allen found himself drifting toward the dance floor, where a string quartet had taken over from the orchestra, playing a softer tune that encouraged couples onto the parquet. A swirl of gowns and tuxedos moved gracefully beneath the chandeliers. He was about to turn back when Olivia appeared at his side, holding her champagne glass with the ease of someone who didn't care how many eyes followed her. "Enjoying yourself?" she asked, her tone carrying that teasing edge he remembered far too well. "I was," Allen replied dryly. "Until my evening turned into a reunion episode one didn't sign up for." Olivia chuckled, taking a delicate sip. "Please. If this were a reunion, you'd have already given a speech about how far you've come since graduation, complete with a slideshow of your Forbes covers." Allen smirked. "And you'd be waiting to correct all my statistics." Her eyes sparkled with mischief. "Only because you inflate them." Before he could respond, the event's host approached with a smile, oblivious to the tension simmering between them. "Mr. Walsh, Ms. Marsh, how wonderful to see you both here. You two know each other, I assume?" Allen gave a slow nod. "Oh, we go way back." "Back far enough to know each other's tricks," Olivia added sweetly. The host laughed. "Perfect. Then I won't hesitate to ask for your help." Both Allen and Olivia raised their brows in unison. "The charity dance-off," the host explained brightly. "It's a tradition now. We pair influential guests together, and the couple that gets the loudest applause earns an additional donation from our sponsors. A fun way to keep the energy up." Olivia froze. "Dance-off." Allen stifled a groan. He hated publicity stunts like this. But before he could politely decline, the host clasped his hands together. "You two would be perfect. High school rivals, reunited in friendly competition for charity? The crowd will love it." Allen glanced at Olivia. She was biting her lip as though weighing the humiliation. Then she caught his look and narrowed her eyes. "Don't even think you're going to outshine me out there." He felt a smirk tug at his mouth despite himself. "Are you challenging me, Marsh?" "Consider it payback," she shot back, setting her glass aside. Minutes later, they were ushered onto the dance floor, spotlights catching the reluctant pair. The crowd clapped eagerly, some whispering, some cheering. Allen could almost hear the tabloids writing their headlines. He placed a hand at Olivia's waist, the other catching her hand as the music began, a lively waltz. She stiffened, her chin lifting in defiance. "Relax," he murmured. "You'll trip if you keep acting like you're in a courtroom." "I'd rather trip than let you lead," she hissed, but she moved with him anyway, her steps precise, sharp. Allen tightened his hold slightly, guiding her through the turn. Still stubborn. Some things never change. Her eyes met his, fire blazing. "And you're still arrogant." Some things never change. But as the waltz quickened, something shifted. Their rhythms synced, almost against their will. Olivia's movements softened, flowing with his instead of against them, and Allen found himself matching her energy, their rivalry melting into something dangerously close to harmony. The crowd began to cheer. A ripple of applause grew louder as Allen spun her under his arm, catching her back against his chest. For a moment their eyes locked again, too close, too intense. She recovered quickly, stepping away as the music swelled to its final note. They bowed stiffly to the audience, both wearing forced smiles. The applause thundered, and the host announced them the winners of the round. Allen released her hand slowly. "Looks like we still make a good team." Olivia's lips curved into that infuriating smirk. "Don't flatter yourself. I carried you." "Really?" "Because from where I stood, you were following my lead." She leaned in slightly, her perfume brushing against his senses. "Keep telling yourself that, Walsh. Just don't forget, you've never beaten me before." With that, she swept off the floor, leaving Allen standing there, half amused, half unnerved. He watched her retreat into the crowd, and for the first time in years, Allen Walsh admitted something privately. He wasn't sure he wanted to beat Olivia Marsh anymore. The Gala's buzz still rang in Allen's ears long after he stepped off the dance floor. He prided himself on control, on never letting emotions bleed into his carefully constructed image. Yet one dance with Olivia Marsh had undone years of composure. The way she fit into his arms, even while glaring at him, the way her eyes sparked like fire against his, he hated to admit it, but he hadn't felt that alive in years. He found her again near the balcony, standing alone with the city skyline glittering behind her. The soft night air drifted in through the open doors, tugging at the hem of her gown. Olivia always did have a knack for claiming space, Allen thought. Even in silence, she made the world look like it belonged to her. He approached cautiously. "Escaping the crowd already? I thought you thrived on competition." Olivia didn't turn right away. She sipped her champagne, her profile outlined by moonlight. "Some battles aren't worth fighting." "Since when have you believed that?" That made her glance at him, one brow raised. "Since I realized some opponents don't know when to quit." Allen gave a low chuckle, leaning against the railing beside her. "You mean me? If the shoe fits." Her voice was light, but Allen caught the undertone, the same one he remembered from a decade ago. Their rivalry hadn't just been about trophies or student council titles. It had been personal, fueled by something neither of them had dared to name back then. His mind slipped backward, unbidden. High school gymnasium, 10 years ago. The debate finals. He stood at the podium, delivering what he thought was his most convincing argument yet, until Olivia rose, countering his points with ruthless precision. Her eyes flashed, her tone confident, and by the time she sat down, Allen knew she had swayed the judges. When they announced her team as the winners, she turned to him with that victorious smirk. "Better luck next time, Walsh." He remembered grinding his teeth, seething at the humiliation. But beneath the anger had been something else, the reluctant acknowledgement that she was brilliant. Maybe even more brilliant than he was. Back to the present. Allen exhaled slowly, turning his gaze to the skyline. "You know, I still remember the debate finals. You wiped the floor with me." Olivia laughed softly. "That was one of my finer moments. I hated you for it." "Good," she teased, but then her expression softened. "Though if I'm being honest, I didn't hate you. Not really." Her words lingered in the cool air. Allen studied her, catching a flicker of vulnerability beneath her polished exterior. "You had a funny way of showing it," he murmured. Olivia shrugged. "What can I say? You were the perfect opponent. You pushed me harder than anyone else. And you couldn't stand losing." Allen smiled faintly. "Neither could you." Their eyes locked again, and for a moment the years between them dissolved. The tension shifted, not sharp rivalry but something warmer, more dangerous. Allen felt his chest tighten, an ache he hadn't realized he carried since graduation. But Olivia broke the moment first, taking another sip of champagne. "It's strange, isn't it? How we spent so much time trying to beat each other. And yet here we are years later, still keeping score." Allen tilted his head, studying her. "Maybe it's not about keeping score anymore. Then what is it about?" The question hung between them, heavy and unspoken. Allen wanted to say it, to admit that her fire had always drawn him in, that rivalry had been their language when neither of them knew how to speak the truth. But before he could, laughter from inside the ballroom spilled onto the balcony. A group of guests stepped out, breaking the fragile intimacy. Olivia straightened, masking her expression with that same confident smirk. "Well, Walsh, it's been enlightening catching up. But I should circulate before people start thinking we've called a truce." Allen watched her walk away, the train of her gown sweeping like a challenge behind her. His chest tightened with something he didn't want to name, something dangerously close to longing. As she disappeared back into the crowd, Allen whispered to himself, still keeping score. Only this time he wasn't sure he wanted to win. The rest of the evening unfolded in a blur of speeches, auctions and polite applause, but Allen's attention remained fixed on Olivia. Every time he caught a glimpse of her across the ballroom, she was laughing with someone, exchanging sharp remarks that made her companions lean closer. She was magnetic, infuriatingly so, and the longer he watched, the more restless he became. By the time dessert was served, fate, or perhaps mischief, placed her directly across the table from him. The long banquet hall glittered with candlelight, but Allen felt as if the spotlight was only on the two of them. Still staring? Olivia's voice was low, sly. Just wondering how long it'll take before you admit you enjoyed the dance, Allen replied smoothly. She tilted her head, her smile sharp. Enjoyed? I nearly sprained my ankle following your lead. You didn't seem to mind when the crowd cheered. Olivia leaned forward, resting her chin lightly on her hand. I minded that you looked like you just won the Super Bowl. Honestly, Walsh, you'd celebrate beating me at rock, paper, scissors. Allen smirked. You'd celebrate beating me at breathing. The table chuckled at their exchange, sensing the tension but mistaking it for playful banter. To them it was entertainment. To Allen and Olivia, it was a rekindled battleground. The host returned to the stage, announcing the next highlight of the evening, a silent auction to fund scholarships. Olivia clapped politely, but her gaze never left Allen's. Still as competitive as ever? She asked. Always, he said. Question is, are you still afraid to lose? Her eyes narrowed, gleaming like emerald glass. To you? Never. The challenge sparked between them, electric and undeniable. Allen leaned closer, lowering his voice. Then let's make this interesting. Olivia arched a brow. I'm listening. You see that item? He gestured toward the auction list projected on the screen. Private weekend retreat at Halcyon Estates. Exclusive, secluded, impossible to book. She glanced at it. So, we both bid. Highest bidder wins. But here's the wager, Allen's lips curved. If you win, I'll personally match every dollar the gala raises tonight. Quietly. No press. Olivia blinked, impressed despite herself. And if you win? Allen's gaze locked on hers, steady, unyielding. You have to join me on that retreat. For the first time that night, Olivia faltered. Her smirk slipped into something closer to shock. That sounds less like a wager and more like blackmail. Call it high stakes, Allen countered, his tone deliberately casual, though his heart beat faster. The corner of her mouth twitched as if fighting a smile. You're outrageous. And you're stalling, he teased. What's the matter, Marsh? Afraid you'll lose to me twice in one night? That did it. Olivia sat straighter, fire in her eyes. Fine. You're on. The moment she agreed, Allen felt both victorious and terrified. The wager was reckless, but that had always been the nature of their dynamic. Pushing limits, daring the other to go further. The auction began, and the room filled with quiet scribbling as bids rose higher and higher. Olivia's pen moved swiftly, her expression calm but determined. Allen countered every number she wrote, his jaw tight with focus. It was no longer about the retreat, it was about pride, about proving neither of them could back down. When the final bell rang, the item sold for an astronomical figure. Gasps rippled through the crowd at the sheer audacity of it. Allen sat back, pulse racing. He didn't need to see the card to know who had won. Olivia's smirk confirmed it. Well, she said softly, looks like you've just bought yourself a very expensive weekend. Allen raised his glass to her, hiding the grin that tugged at his lips. Worth every penny. As their eyes held across the table, Allen realized the wager had done more than settle a contest. It had set something in motion, something neither of them would be able to control. The morning after the gala, Allen told himself he would forget about Olivia Marsh. He sat in his penthouse office, the skyline stretching endlessly behind him, drowning himself in reports and emails. Numbers he could control. Markets he could predict. But the image of her smirk, the fire in her eyes when she accepted his wager, lingered stubbornly. He had meant the bet as a reckless jab, a way to keep their rivalry alive. Yet now, with the retreat weekend looming, the thought of it sent a strange thrill through him. He shook it off. Focus, Walsh. You don't get distracted. His assistant knocked, stepping in with a folder. Sir, I've finalized the list of consultants for the Education Fund Expansion Project. Allen skimmed the document, until his eyes caught a name he hadn't expected. Olivia Marsh. His head snapped up. You've got to be kidding me. The assistant blinked nervously. She was highly recommended. Independent, sharp, and she's worked with nonprofits before. The board voted unanimously. She's scheduled to meet you at noon. Allen leaned back in his chair, exhaling through his nose. Fate wasn't just mocking him, it was orchestrating an entire comedy at his expense. By noon, Olivia was striding into his office as if she owned the building. "Walsh," she greeted, her tone clipped but polite enough to pass for professional. She set her portfolio on the desk, flipping it open without waiting for an invitation. "Shall we get started?" Allen gestured for her to sit, though his jaw tightened. "So you're the board's choice. Figures. I didn't lobby for it if that's what you're implying." She adjusted her blazer, her green eyes narrowing. "Believe me, I was just as shocked as you when I saw your name on the client list. If it makes you feel better, I nearly declined." Allen gave a humorless laugh. "Funny. I nearly fired the board. Still a control freak, I see. And you're still infuriating." Their words clashed like swords, but neither flinched. Instead, Olivia opened her notes and launched into a brisk presentation, outlining strategies for scaling the education fund to reach underserved districts. She was precise, persuasive, and passionate, and Allen hated how impressed he felt watching her work. "This isn't about publicity," she said firmly, meeting his eyes. "If you want to expand your foundation, you need to invest where it actually matters. Rural areas, not just flashy urban schools that make for nice photo ops." Allen arched a brow. "Are you accusing me of chasing headlines?" Olivia didn't blink. "I'm saying your philanthropy has potential, if you're willing to make it real." The room went quiet. Allen should have been offended. Instead, he found himself suppressing a smile. No one else spoke to him like this. Not board members, not investors, not the media. Only Olivia. He leaned forward, steepling his hands. "You know, most consultants would be trying to flatter me right now." Olivia gave a dry laugh. "And that's why most consultants fail." For a moment they just stared at each other, rivals equals something more. The air between them hummed with unspoken history. Allen cleared his throat, breaking the spell. "Fine. We'll try it your way. But if this backfires, the blame's on you." "Deal," she said briskly, though a small smile tugged at her lips. Over the next week, Olivia's presence became impossible to ignore. Meetings, site visits, late-night calls, everywhere Allen turned, there she was, sharp and relentless. And every time they clashed, sparks flew, not just of irritation but of something deeper, something neither dared to name. One afternoon, as they toured a potential school site together, Allen caught Olivia kneeling to speak with a shy little boy clutching a tattered book. Her voice softened, her smile genuine, and Allen felt something twist in his chest. This wasn't the rival who used to taunt him in classrooms. This was a woman who cared, who fought for more than victory. When she rose and found him watching, Olivia tilted her head. "What?" "Nothing," he said quickly, though his throat felt dry. "Just, you surprise me sometimes." Olivia's eyes lingered on his for a beat too long. Then she looked away. "You'll get used to it." But Allen wasn't sure he wanted to. That evening, back in his office, Allen stared at the retreat invitation sitting on his desk. Their wager was no longer just a game. With every passing day, the line between rivalry and something more blurred dangerously. And for the first time, Allen wondered if losing to Olivia Marsh might not be the worst thing in the world. The rain came without warning. Allen and Olivia had just finished another long site visit at a rural school on the outskirts of the city when the skies broke open, sheets of water drenching the cracked pavement. Their driver was delayed, leaving them stranded beneath the awning of a worn-down community center. Olivia hugged her blazer tighter around her, droplets clinging to the ends of her auburn hair. "Perfect. Stuck here with you. Just my luck." Allen smirked, shaking rain from his cuffs. "Don't pretend you're not thrilled." She shot him a glare, but it lacked its usual sharpness. Maybe it was the exhaustion from the day's work, or the way the rain blurred the world into something quieter, more intimate. Either way, the edge in her voice was softer than usual. "You really can't go 5 minutes without being insufferable, can you?" she muttered. "5 minutes is generous," Allen replied, leaning against the wall beside her. "You usually call me insufferable at 2. Despite herself, Olivia let out a small laugh. She caught his grin and quickly looked away, her arms still crossed. Silence stretched between them, filled only by the steady rhythm of the rain. Allen stole a glance at her profile, the way her jaw tightened when she was lost in thought, the faint crease between her brows. She looked less like the polished strategist everyone admired and more like the girl he remembered from high school. Determined, restless, impossible to ignore. "You know," he said quietly, "you're different than I expected." Olivia turned, surprised. "Different how?" I thought you'd still be the girl trying to beat me at everything, he admitted. But now, it's not just about winning for you. It's about making things better. For the kids, for the schools. I didn't see that before. She studied him for a long moment, her green eyes searching his face as if trying to gauge his sincerity. Finally, she let out a soft sigh. You always assumed I was just trying to one-up you, weren't you? Allen teased. Maybe, she said with a faint smile. But it wasn't only about that. Competing with you pushed me harder, yes, but I cared about the work too. I wanted to prove, to everyone, to myself, that I was capable of more than people thought. That I wasn't just some girl from nowhere trying to outshine the golden boy. Her voice cracked slightly on the last words, and Allen felt a pang of guilt. He'd never thought about how his own privilege, the family name, the money, the spotlight, might have made her struggle sharper. Olivia, his tone softened. I didn't know you felt that way. She gave a humorless laugh. Of course you didn't. You were too busy trying to win. Allen hesitated before reaching out, his hand brushing lightly against hers. She stiffened but didn't pull away. I might not have seen it then, he said, but I see it now. And for what it's worth, you've always been more than my rival. You've been the one person I could never ignore. The confession hung in the air, heavier than the rain. Olivia turned her gaze back to the street, her lips pressed together. You don't get to say things like that, Allen. Why not? Because it makes it harder to keep hating you. Her honesty struck him like a blow. Allen swallowed, his chest tight. He wanted to tell her he didn't hate her either, that maybe he never really had. But the sound of an approaching car cut through the moment, headlights flashing through the rain. Their driver had finally arrived. Olivia pulled her hand back quickly, smoothing her damp hair. Her walls slammed back into place, her smirk returning like armor. Come on, Walsh. We've got work to do. Allen followed her into the car, but his thoughts stayed behind under the rain-soaked awning, where for a fleeting moment Olivia Marsh had let him see the cracks beneath her defenses. And it was enough to make him realize that winning against her was no longer what he wanted. He wanted something far more dangerous. The weeks following the rain-soaked evening blurred into a rhythm of meetings, strategy sessions, and site visits. Allen told himself he was focused on the project, but the truth was harder to deny. Every moment with Olivia chipped away at his carefully constructed armor. She challenged him. She infuriated him. She fascinated him. And worst of all, she seemed completely unaffected by the storm she was stirring inside him. They were reviewing scholarship applications one late evening at the foundation's headquarters. The office was quiet, the city lights glowing through the tall windows. Olivia sat opposite him at the long mahogany table, her blazer discarded, her hair tumbling over one shoulder as she flipped through papers with meticulous focus. Allen had been staring at the same application for 10 minutes without absorbing a single word. He couldn't stop watching her, the way her lips curved slightly as she read, the faint crease of concentration in her brow. Finally, Olivia looked up, catching him. What? He blinked, caught off guard. Nothing. You've been staring at me like I just sprouted a second head. Allen leaned back, forcing a smirk. Maybe I'm just trying to figure out how you haven't aged a day since high school. Still the same Olivia Marsh, always 2 steps ahead. Her lips quirked. Careful, Walsh. That almost sounded like a compliment. Maybe it was. For a moment, silence stretched, thick with unspoken tension. Olivia broke eye contact first, shuffling the papers into a neat stack. Don't get soft on me. I wouldn't know what to do if you stopped being insufferable. Allen chuckled, but there was a roughness to it. You say that like you'd miss me. Miss you? She scoffed, though her cheeks flushed faintly. I spent years being grateful for the silence after you left. Funny, Allen murmured. I spent years wondering if you missed me at all. Her eyes snapped to his, sharp, defensive. Why would I? You disappeared, Allen. Off to your empire, your headlines, your perfect billionaire life. You didn't think twice about the rest of us. The words cut deeper than he expected. He leaned forward, his voice low. That's not fair. I didn't disappear. I worked for everything I built. And maybe I didn't look back because it hurt too much. Olivia's expression faltered. Hurt. He held her gaze. You were always there, Olivia. Every win, every loss, we were inseparable in a way. Leaving meant leaving that behind too. Her lips parted, but no words came. For once, Olivia Marsh, the woman who always had a comeback, was silent. The air shifted, charged. Allen rose slowly, crossing to her side of the table. She tilted her head back to look up at him, her breath catching as he leaned down, close enough to feel the warmth of her skin. "This rivalry of ours?" he whispered. Maybe it was never just rivalry. Her heartbeat thundered in her chest. She could feel his breath, smell the faint hint of cedar and spice clinging to him. For a split second, she imagined what it would be like to close the distance, to surrender to the fire that had burned between them for years. But pride was a stubborn thing. Olivia stood abruptly, pushing her chair back. The sudden scrape echoed in the quiet room. "Don't," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Allen froze, searching her face. "Don't what?" "Don't confuse whatever this is. We're colleagues now. Partners on a project. Nothing more." "Is that what you really believe?" he asked softly. Olivia crossed her arms, her defenses snapping back into place. "It's what's real. Whatever history we had, it doesn't matter. I don't get tangled in the past." Allen studied her, jaw tight. He wanted to argue, to push, to make her admit that she felt the same magnetic pull he did. But he also knew pressing too hard would drive her further away. So he stepped back, giving her space. "Fine. If that's what you want." Her eyes flickered, betraying a crack in her resolve, but she lifted her chin. "It is." The room felt colder now, the hum of the city outside a stark reminder of reality. Olivia gathered her papers briskly, slipping them into her bag. "We should call it a night. Long day tomorrow." She walked toward the door without another glance, her heels clicking against the polished floor. Allen watched her go, frustration burning in his chest. Pride had always been their greatest weapon, and their greatest weakness. Tonight, it had stopped them both from crossing a line they'd been dancing around for weeks. When the door closed behind her, Allen sat heavily back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. For years, he had told himself that victory mattered more than anything else. But as he stared at the empty space Olivia had just occupied, Allen realized something terrifying. This wasn't about winning anymore. It was about not losing her. The storm broke on a Tuesday morning, catching them both off guard. Olivia had just finished leading a small group of scholarship candidates through their final interviews when her phone buzzed. The headline flashing across the screen made her blood run cold. Walsh Foundation accused of misusing charity funds. Her stomach flipped. Within minutes, the office was in chaos. Staff whispered in hushed tones, phones rang non-stop, and reporters swarmed outside the building like vultures. By the time Olivia stormed into the conference room, Allen was already there, staring at his laptop with a grim expression. His tie hung loose around his neck, and his usually polished composure looked frayed. "Tell me this isn't true," Olivia demanded, throwing the tablet with the article onto the table. Allen looked up, his eyes dark. "It isn't. But the media doesn't care about the truth right now. Someone leaked false documents, fabricated transfers, accounts I've never seen. It's meant to smear the foundation." "Who would?" Olivia stopped, realization dawning. "Your competitors. This project is making too much noise. Someone wants to bury it before it takes off." "Exactly," Allen said, pushing back from the table. "But until we clear this up, our donors will panic. The board's already calling for an emergency meeting. If we can't prove our innocence fast enough, they'll pull the funding," Olivia finished. Her chest tightened. Months of work, the dreams of dozens of students, all of it could collapse overnight. For a moment, silence pressed between them, heavy and suffocating. Then Olivia squared her shoulders. "So what's the plan?" Allen studied her. "The plan? You're still in this, after what the papers are saying?" She met his gaze firmly. "Do you really think I'd walk away now? This isn't about you, Allen. It's about those kids. About giving them a chance. I won't let anyone take that from them." Something in his chest softened. For all her sharp edges and stubborn pride, Olivia Marsh was unshakably loyal to the causes she cared about. Allen exhaled slowly. "Then we fight this. Together." The hours that followed were brutal. They pored over financial records, traced bank accounts, and cross-referenced every line of the supposed leaks. The deeper they dug, the clearer it became. The evidence was fabricated, a deliberate attempt to frame the foundation. But proving that to the board was another battle entirely. By late afternoon, Allen looked exhausted, his eyes shadowed from lack of sleep. Olivia, sitting beside him, reached over instinctively, steadying the papers in his hands when they trembled slightly. "You need a break," she murmured. He shook his head. "Not until this is over." "Allen." His eyes met hers, weary but determined. "If I lose this, Olivia, I don't just lose the foundation. I lose the one thing that makes all of this." He gestured vaguely around him. Worth it? Olivia's breath caught. There was no mistaking the raw honesty in his voice. For once, there was no mask of arrogance, no billionaire bravado, just a man who cared deeply about something beyond himself. Their fingers intertwined easily now, no longer a battlefield but a quiet promise. Later that evening, after the event had ended, Allen led her up to the foundation's rooftop garden. The city lights glittered below, the same skyline that had witnessed so many of their battles. But tonight there was no rivalry. Only them. Do you remember the first night at the gala? Allen asked, leaning against the railing. You looked at me like you wanted to throw your champagne in my face. Olivia laughed softly. I almost did. And now? His tone was lighter than air, but his eyes were serious. She pretended to think, tapping her chin. Now I tolerate you. Occasionally. Allen chuckled, shaking his head. I'll take it. Then he reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Olivia froze. Allen? He opened it slowly, revealing not a flashy, ostentatious diamond, but a simple, elegant ring. Timeless. Thoughtful. Perfect. I don't want to be your rival anymore, he said quietly. I want to be your partner. In every sense. Olivia Marsh, will you? She didn't let him finish. Laughing through tears, she threw her arms around his neck and kissed him, hard and certain. Yes, she whispered against his lips. Of course, yes. When they finally pulled apart, the city stretched out beneath them, endless and dazzling. For the first time in their long, tangled history, Allen and Olivia weren't fighting to win or outdo one another. They were fighting forward, together, toward a future neither of them had dared imagine back in their high school days. And this time there would be no losers. Only love. If this story touched your heart, remember, sometimes the smallest steps lead to the biggest changes. Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe and join us for more stories that prove compassion can change the world. And in that moment, she realized the truth she'd been fighting for weeks. Her rivalry with Allen had never been about hating him. It had always been about how much he mattered, how much he had always mattered. Before she could respond, the door burst open. The board members filed in, stone-faced, ready for war. The meeting was brutal. Allen stood at the head of the table, presenting their findings with calm precision, but the accusations flew thick and fast. Board members questioned his integrity, his leadership, his judgment. Olivia sat beside him, silent at first, until one man sneered, "Perhaps this is why bringing in outside help was a mistake. Ms. Marsh, wasn't it? You've been far too close to these operations. Maybe you knew more than you're letting on." The word struck like a slap. Olivia's hands clenched into fists, but before she could defend herself, Allen's voice cut through the room like steel. "Don't you dare," he said low and fierce. "Olivia Marsh has done more for this foundation in the last 3 months than half of you have in years. If you want to come after someone, come after me, but leave her out of it." A hush fell. Olivia's throat tightened. He had defended her without hesitation, without calculation, even at the risk of his own standing. Something shifted then, not just between them but in the room itself. With renewed fire, Olivia rose to her feet. "These accusations are a distraction," she said firmly, her voice carrying across the table. "And while you're busy playing politics, real students with real dreams are waiting. We don't have time for infighting. We have to fix this. Now." Her conviction was undeniable. One by one, the board members faltered, their hostility softening into reluctant agreement. Hours later, when the room had finally cleared and the worst of the storm had passed, Allen and Olivia found themselves alone again. They stood by the window, the city glittering beneath them, the weight of the day slowly lifting. "You were incredible in there," Allen said quietly. Olivia shook her head. "We were incredible. Together." He smiled faintly, a tired but genuine smile. "I couldn't have done this without you." Her heart thudded. "You'd have found a way. Maybe." His gaze held hers, unwavering. "But I wouldn't have wanted to." Silence stretched, thick with everything they hadn't said. Then Allen stepped closer, his hand brushing hers where it rested on the window ledge. Olivia's breath hitched, but this time she didn't pull away. "All this time," Allen murmured, "I thought winning was everything. Beating you, proving myself, staying on top. But today, I realized I don't care about winning anymore." Her lips parted, her voice barely a whisper. "What do you care about then?" His hand closed over hers, warm and steady. You. The word hung in the air, raw and irrevocable. For a heartbeat, Olivia's pride screamed at her to resist, to retreat into the safety of rivalry and distance. But her heart, stubborn, relentless, knew the truth. She squeezed his hand, her voice trembling. You drive me crazy, Allen Walsh. Likewise, he said with a crooked smile. And then, finally, the dam broke. He leaned in, capturing her lips with his, and all the years of tension, of bickering and denial, melted into fire and tenderness. It wasn't victory. It wasn't defeat. It was something far greater. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Olivia rested her forehead against his. So what now? Allen chuckled softly. Now, we stop fighting each other, and start fighting for each other. 6 months later, the Walsh Foundation was thriving again. The scandal had long since faded into the shadows, exposed for the smear campaign it was. Donations had not only returned but doubled, inspired by the transparency Allen and Olivia had fought so hard to uphold. The first group of scholarship recipients had just been announced, and Olivia watched them beam as they posed for photos with their acceptance letters. Bright-eyed, hopeful, nervous, they reminded her why she'd agreed to work with Allen in the first place. You're smiling, a familiar voice teased. Olivia turned to find Allen at her side, impeccably dressed but wearing that softer expression he reserved only for her. I am allowed to smile, you know, she replied, arching an eyebrow. I know. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. But I like it better when you're smiling at me. She rolled her eyes, but the warmth in her chest betrayed her. You're insufferable. And yet, Allen said smoothly, slipping his hand into hers, you're still here.